Witnesses, The Fall of Eden, Book 1, written by Lopez.
Chapter 1. The Still Before. The morning began like any other, with the soft rustling of sheets and the distant murmur of waves beyond the window. Mara stirred first. She always did. Years of hospital shifts had carved her sleep into shallow segments. Light, alert, ready. The glow from the hallway light spilled in under the bedroom door, golden and still. She turned toward the quiet rise and fall of Bobby's chest beside her. He slept on his stomach, one arm slung lazily over the edge of the bed. His hair was tousled, beard patchy, where it refused to grow fully. She smiled at that and let the moment linger before slipping out from under the covers. In the next room, she heard the gentle whir of the ceiling fan and the faint squeak of bed springs. Toñito's awake. She padded down the hallway in thick socks, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. When she opened the door, her son was already halfway dressed, one sock on, the other in his hand, eyes wide with cartoon seriousness. "You're up early," she said. He shrugged. "Had a dream about a spaceship." "Good or bad?" Good. But then it crashed into school." Mara chuckled, ruffling his dark curls. "Guess you get a snow day if that happens." "Mom, there's no snow here." "Exactly." She helped him with the other sock and moved to the kitchen. The scent of coffee was already in the air. Bobby must have set the timer the night before. She loved him for small things like that. Not the big gestures, but the quiet rituals. Fresh coffee, folded laundry, notes in her lunch bag when she pulled a double shift. She cracked 2 eggs into a pan, set tortillas on the burner beside it. The teddy bear charm around her neck caught the light as she moved. Her little teddy bear. Her nickname for Toñito since he was born, when he'd clung to her shirt like he might never let go. Bobby appeared soon after, freshly showered, tie in one hand, toast in the other. "Morning, mi amor," he said, leaning in for a kiss. "Watch the tie," she mumbled, lips pressed to his stubble cheek. "I'm not putting it on until the parking lot." Toñito slid into his seat, still sleepy-eyed, but grinning. Mara placed a plate in front of him, then poured coffee for herself and Bobby. "I've got that new intake in trauma today," she said, eyes on her mug. "The one with the spinal cord compression." "You'll fix him," Bobby said. "You always do." "You say that like it's a magic trick." "No," he replied, slinging his bag over his shoulder. "I say it like it's the truth." She hesitated, then said, "I don't know. Sometimes I think I need something different. Not different, just more." "More?" he asked, curious. "I was talking to someone in the ER the other day. They're short-staffed again. It's messier, faster. But maybe that's what I need." "You thinking of switching?" "Maybe. I love the floor work. But I don't want to burn out doing the same thing every day." He leaned against the doorway, thoughtful. "You'd be great in the ER. You already are. Just faster paced." She smiled. "You think I can still keep up with the 20-somethings? Bobby grinned. "You'd run circles around him." He kissed her again, softer this time, then tousled Toñito's hair on his way out. "Be good for your teachers," Mara called after their son. I'm always good, he said, flashing a grin that was missing 2 teeth. She watched them go, the screen door creaking open, then thudding shut behind them. The drive to the hospital took 20 minutes, give or take traffic. She followed the familiar coastal road, where the sun had begun to burn off the morning mist. A line of pelicans glided low over the surf. Surfboards jutted from the backs of pickup trucks. The city slowly stirred to life. Bakers opening their shutters, cyclists weaving between cars, and tourists sipping coffee from paper cups. Palm trees leaned in from the sidewalks like gossiping old women. At every red light, Mara glanced at the world outside her windshield and felt, for a moment, the surrealness of routine. How many days start exactly like this, she wondered. At the hospital, she parked in the lower staff lot and took the elevator up to the main floor. She walked the familiar corridor, past the ER bay and the triage desk, nodding to fellow nurses and interns along the way. She signed in, sanitized, and tucked her badge into the front of her scrub top. Room 412 needed vitals. Room 408 needed meds. Room 417 had just returned from imaging. 1,000 small fires to put out before noon. But Mara moved through it with practiced grace. She was calm, steady, efficient, without being cold. Doctors trusted her. Patients opened up to her without knowing why. She entered room 412, where a middle-aged woman with a fractured hip lay awake, staring out the window. "Morning, Gloria," Mara said, gently checking the IV line. Gloria turned, smiling. "You again." She sat up with Mara's help and gave her a warm smile. Mara was Gloria's favorite nurse. She practically was the only one who would listen to her stories. Of her youth, her grandchildren, her husband Ruiz, who passed away several years ago. She turned her head, slowly, back toward the window, eyes distant. "My husband and I used to walk along the shore, watching the seagulls fly over the ocean, the occasional dolphin cresting the waters, and the fishermen with their fishing poles casting at the edge of the pier. Here and there, one would yell with joy, reeling in a fish. We would always sit at this weather-worn bench, not far from here, just sit there, enjoying each other's company. We would sit and watch as the sun would set over the ocean, and the sun would show off its beautiful colors painted against the sky. Oranges, reds, and violets. Afterwards, we'd walk to the pier and buy some saltwater taffy." She paused, voice thin with memory. I miss him so much," voice cracking. "I feel lonely at times." Mara blinked back a sudden sting of tears. She reached for Gloria's hand, gently wrapping it in her own. "Gloria, no estás sola. You're not alone. I'm right here with you. Best part of my morning." "You're just saying that because I bring the good meds." Gloria chuckled, but her voice softened. "No, I mean it. You're easy to talk to. Thank you for being present." Mara blinked, surprised by the warmth in the words. "Of course. That's why I'm here." She adjusted the blankets, gave a reassuring squeeze to the woman's hand, and stepped out. At the nurse's station, she found Carla leaning against the counter, jotting down notes on a clipboard. Carla was in her 40s, quick-witted, and had been at the hospital even longer than Mara. "Gloria give you another sunset story?" Carla asked with a smirk. "She did," Mara said, smiling softly. "She misses her husband. Said she feels alone." Carla glanced up. "That woman could give TED Talks on grief. But you ground her, Mara. You have that presence." Mara nodded, her smile fading. "Lately, I've been wondering if I need something different. I was thinking about the ER again." Carla raised an eyebrow. "You serious?" "I don't know. It's not that I don't love this floor. I do. But it's like I'm moving through fog some days. I want to feel awake, like what I do still pushes me." Carla scribbled something, then looked back. "You've got the instincts for the ER, but it's a beast. Fast, messy, unpredictable." "Exactly," Mara said. "Maybe that's what I need." By late morning, she stood at the nurse's station, sipping lukewarm coffee, reviewing charts on her clipboard. Then, something shifted. Voices behind her dimmed. One of the interns stood frozen, staring up at the wall-mounted TV. "Hey, turn that up," someone said. Mara turned. On screen, a news anchor's face was pale, uncertain. "Breaking coverage now. Reports from multiple coastal stations indicate an unusual phenomenon. The ocean. It appears to be receding. Not due to tides or seismic activity. At least, not any that's been detected yet. Experts are advising caution near all major shorelines. Wait. Okay, we're now getting a live feed." The footage cut to a helicopter view, sweeping over the shoreline. And the sea was gone. Hundreds of feet of wet sand stretched outward, like the ocean had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. People stood on the shore, stunned. Some walked forward, phones raised. Others simply stared. Mara felt it in her bones before she could name it. Wrong. Like a held breath before a scream. Like the world had skipped a beat. The screen flickered again. The anchor's voice shook. We don't know what this is." Mara lowered her clipboard, the hallway lights buzzing above her, like something just woke up. Chapter 2. The Opening Sky. Mara stood frozen as the television droned on, her half-drunk coffee cooling in her hand. The news anchor's voice was uneven, fighting against panic. "We're receiving confirmation from multiple coastal monitoring stations. What you're seeing is not a tidal anomaly. The ocean has receded by more than 600 feet in some regions. This footage, this is live." The camera feed flickered to a view from a news helicopter. The ocean floor lay bare, stretching endlessly. Saltwater fish flopped helplessly on exposed sand. Boats rested sideways, half submerged in drying muck. People wandered too close, some laughing, some recording the phenomena on their cell phones. Others stood still, just staring. A low murmur passed through the nurse's station. "I've lived here my whole life," Carla said beside her. "That's not right. That's not just tides." The air grew thick, pressurized, like something massive had just inhaled and was holding the breath. Mara set down her coffee. "I need to call Bobby." She checked her phone. No signal. Another nurse tried a landline. Nothing. Dead tone. Then, the floor shifted, just slightly. A tremor. Alarms blared. IV pumps beeped. Someone screamed. "Earthquake!" Mara grabbed the edge of the counter as the world jolted. A computer monitor crashed to the floor. Lights flickered and swung above them. An elderly man in a wheelchair tipped, and she rushed forward to brace him. "Everyone get low! Away from windows!" someone shouted. The quake subsided, leaving a silence more terrifying than the noise. And then it began. The clouds outside the high windows no longer moved with the wind. They spiraled, unnaturally slow, forming a vortex over the coastline. Mara stared, heart pounding. Something was pushing through. Light was bending, warping. "It's not a storm," someone whispered. "It's opening." The hospital shook again, stronger this time. Ceiling tiles cracked and fell. A pipe burst overhead, spraying cold water. A gurney rolled past, unmanned. Mara turned a corner just as a section of wall collapsed, and a scream rang out from inside the ER. She ran in to see a child pinned beneath a fallen cabinet. 2 staff members were already lifting it. She joined without hesitation. The building's intercom buzzed and spat static. A shaky voice finally broke through. "All staff, prepare for full evacuation. Repeat, prepare." More static. Mara looked out the shattered ER window. The city skyline warped in heat like waves. The clouds, now tinged crimson, split apart as something pushed through. It wasn't a vessel, not in any way Earth had ever known. It was a shape, a void with edges, folding light and shadow into itself. She heard a voice crackle faintly from a battery-operated radio near the front desk. "Multiple structural collapses near downtown. Roosevelt school zone hit. Casualties confirmed. Emergency personnel en route." Roosevelt. Doñito School. Bobby's district. Mara dropped everything and bolted for the stairwell. Smoke filled the hallway. Nurses screamed. Somewhere behind her, a wall of glass shattered. She burst out the back of the hospital, into chaos. Ambulances were overturned, streetlights bent. The road was cracked like broken glass. The sound of distant sirens barely rose above the low rumble that still lingered beneath the city, like an echo. Structures started to burn as fires began to erupt throughout the city. Ash fell like snow. She ran. The school was 6 blocks away. She didn't feel her feet hit the ground. As she pushed through the crowds of panicked people, every second became longer than the last. The streets were smeared with dust and glass. A toppled bus lay halfway into a storefront. She could smell gas, hear screaming. Concrete and steel littered the streets, and the cries for help went unanswered. The sun was no longer bright. It filtered through ash and strange shadows. When she reached the corner of the school block, she skidded to a stop. Blood trickled down her temple from a shallow cut. Her breath came in jagged gasps. She looked toward the school's main courtyard. The building where Bobby taught had completely collapsed, a smoldering heap of twisted rebar and cinder block. There was nothing left to run toward. No, Bobby, she whispered, voice cracking. She turned toward the single-story classrooms near the basketball courts. Toñito's wing. The earth was broken. The sidewalk cracked and lifting. She climbed through dust and debris, shouting his name. Toñito! Mijo! The numbers on the classroom doors came into view, some hanging loose on bent nails. Room 357 was halfway buried. The windows were shattered. A chunk of the roof had caved in. She climbed through the broken doorway. The air was thick, with dust and smoke. Children cried. A few were still. A teacher, young, mid-30s, was slumped against the far wall, her skull bloodied and eyes vacant. Papers and school projects scattered all over the floor of the classroom. What once was a place for education and fun was now turned to ruins. Mara coughed, choking on plaster and ash as she made her way through a maze of debris. She stepped over a toppled bookcase, pushing through the haze. Toñito, baby, where are you? Then, a small sound, a breath. She spotted him, in the far corner, buried beneath a collapsed table and a tangle of chairs. His small frame was twisted, but his eyes fluttered open as she approached. "Oh my God!" she cried. "Toñito!" She dropped to her knees, pulling the wreckage away. His shirt was torn, his skin streaked with dirt and blood. She cradled him in her lap, rocking slightly. "Mijo, are you okay? Look at me. It's Mama." His lips moved. "Mama?" He smiled faintly, and tears ran down his cheeks, cleaning the dust off his angelic face as he gazed at his mama. Then his eyes rolled back. He exhaled a soft, final breath. No, 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 no. She sobbed. "Stay with me, please, baby. Stay with me." She held him tighter, pressing her face to his hair. Around her, the walls groaned. Dust drifted from the ceiling. She stayed there, rocking, unable to move, until the silence grew too deep to ignore. And then she looked up through a partially collapsed roof. The sky was gone. In its place hung a colossal shadow, curving from horizon to horizon, like a second sky, stretching from the Pacific to the Atlantic, blotting out the sun. Its underside rippled with dim pulses of cold light, as if the stars themselves were trapped beneath its surface. Where it touched the clouds, they churned red and violet, boiling like oceans under glass. There was no roar, no voice, only the hum, a deep, living vibration that shook her teeth and bones. The shape was impossible, both smooth and jagged, constantly shifting, like a mind too vast to hold form. Symbols crawled across its rim, spinning, aligning, vanishing. It wasn't flying. It wasn't floating. It was descending. And somehow, Mara knew it had always been there, waiting, holding her lifeless son over her knees. She whispered through the dust. What are you? Chapter 3. The Ones Who Remain. Mara sat, cradling her son's lifeless body, as the ash settled around her like snowfall. The air was thick with silence. No sirens, no screams, just the low hum that trembled in her chest, like the memory of thunder. Her arms had gone numb, but she wouldn't let go. Donito's small frame felt impossibly light now, as if the weight of his soul had been the only thing holding him to earth. The sky was still veiled by the being, immense, unmoving, a dark shape that spanned the heavens. Its presence pressed down on the world like judgment. It made no sound, no gesture, yet every person who looked up felt seen, known, measured. She heard footsteps crunching through the rubble behind her. At first, she didn't turn, not until the man crouched beside her and spoke in a voice low and steady. "You can't stay here. Not alone." She looked up through the blur of grief and dust. The man's face was scraped and bloodied, his hair matted with ash. He had kind eyes, and behind them, something searching. "I'm Ezra," he said. "I saw you from the street." Mara didn't answer. She looked back down at Donito and brushed a smear of dirt from his cheek. Ezra followed her gaze, his throat tensed. "I'll help you carry him." Gently, reverently, they wrapped the boy in a thermal blanket, scavenged from a collapsed aid truck. Ezra helped her to her feet, and together they walked through the remains of the schoolyard. The sun no longer cast shadows. Only a dull, red haze filtered through the strange light above. They made their way through the broken streets. Fires burned in empty lots. Power lines sparked in silence. A woman screamed in the distance, but no one came to help. A group of men tore supplies from an overturned grocery truck. A dog ran through the wreckage with a stuffed animal in its mouth. By the time they reached the next block, Mara could barely walk. Her legs trembled beneath her. Ezra took the bundle from her arms without asking. "There's a makeshift center a few blocks down," he said. "It's an old gym. Some people are gathering." They turned onto a street lined with cars pushed onto sidewalks and trees split down the middle. If the Bible had to use a scene to describe the apocalypse, this would be it. The gym stood at the far end, its doors broken open, a flicker of firelight coming from inside. Near the entrance, a little girl sat on the curb, her knees drawn to her chest, face expressionless. Her mother lay beside her, unmoving. Mara stopped, crouched slowly, and reached for her hand. The girl looked up, eyes wide but dry. She didn't speak, just reached back. Mara helped her up, and they walked the rest of the way together. Inside, the gymnasium had been turned into a crude shelter. Blankets and tarps lined the floor. A few battery-powered lanterns flickered. People sat in clusters, silent, crying, praying. In one corner, a man in dusty fatigues was tending to the wounded, wrapping a gash on someone's leg. His movements were practiced, efficient, but his eyes were far away, haunted. Across the room, a man in black sat quietly with a few others. A white collar peeked out from beneath his coat. He didn't speak, just watched. A woman, her white blouse streaked with soot, hair pulled back tight, paced in slow, anxious circles. She muttered under her breath, occasionally stopping to check a radio for signals that never came. Ezra set Doñito's body gently down beside a cluster of blankets and lowered himself to the ground. Mara didn't sit. She stood, staring blankly at the sky through a hole in the gym's roof. The being was still there. Someone shouted in the hallway, "We've got signal!" A group huddled around a small radio, its antenna bent nearly in half. Static hissed for several seconds. Then a voice broke through. "Shh! Global event. Power infrastructure compromised. Leaders around the world summoned to unknown coordinates. Contact made with unidentified celestial anomaly." The signal cut out. Mara sat down beside Ezra. The girl leaned against her shoulder, silent as ever. Across the gym, the man in fatigues looked up and finally spoke. "What the hell does summoned mean?" No one answered. Candles were lit. The scent of wax and dust filled the air. Ezra leaned back against the wall and looked toward Mara. "We need to stay together," he said quietly. "Whatever this thing is, it hasn't left." Mara didn't look at him. Her eyes were still on the sky. "We're not alone," she whispered. Ezra followed her gaze. His jaw clenched. "No," he said. "We're not." A few moments passed before another figure approached quietly from the far side of the gym. He wore a dark green medic's vest, the sleeves torn, his hands stained with dried blood. He moved with purpose, but not urgency. A man used to triage, not panic. His name tag read, M.D. Khan. "I'm Malik," he said, crouching beside Mara and Ezra. "I was a corpsman. There's not a lot of help left. I'm trying to do what I can." Mara looked up slowly, her eyes red, face streaked with ash. She didn't speak. "I can help you with your son," Malik said gently, gesturing toward the wrapped bundle lying beside them. At that, Mara's grief cracked through the numbness. "My boy," she whispered, then louder. "My boy. My poor little boy." She bent over the body again, sobbing. The little girl beside her, Leora, flinched, but didn't move. Her dark eyes followed Malik, wide, with a kind of quiet understanding beyond her years. A hand touched Mara's shoulder. It was Father Callistus, tall and soft-spoken, his priest's collar smudged with soot. "You're not alone," he said, with the gentle cadence of a priest long practiced in giving peace, even as he searches for his own. "He's with God now. And you're still here. That means something." Mara trembled beneath his touch, but she didn't pull away. Malik nodded to Ezra, then gently reached for the boy's body. "I'll make sure he's treated with respect." Ezra stood to help. Callistus followed to give the boy his last rites, and Leora clung to Mara's arm. Across the room, Sabine watched from the shadows, arms crossed, jaw set, trying to convince herself that order would return. But even she wasn't sure who she was anymore in this new world.